Hey, it's Sharon and I talking Hawkeye. Actually, we're talking about Imposter Syndrome this episode. Hey guys, it's Dwight, your host and psychotherapist for the program. I'm here to talk to you about Imposter Syndrome, which is a very fascinating dynamic that we get into when we are afraid to be who we are. That's enough intro. We're gonna get into a discussion. Sharon Blady, who is our Marvel correspondent, and for all things nerddom, although let's be honest, I talk a lot about nerddom all over the place, but this time we're using the Marvel TV series Hawkeye to examine how imposter syndrome plays a role in our lives, and using the sort of allegory or whatever of the characters to get into that. Is it an allegory or is it a metaphor? Tweet at me at BreakABrain. If you are interested to see the video of these interviews, that goes up on the Patreon feed every time that I'm doing an episode. If we do have successful video, that goes up usually immediately. So sometimes a little before the episode comes out. For the patrons, is that our upcoming kind of things that we're going to have available on there are plentiful. If you check out patreon.com/brokenbrain, you'll see that there's a lot of bonus materials that you can have access to there. So our next episode after this that should be coming up will be a discussion about COVID and how things are going over in England. Our British health expert, Josh Wood, will be coming on, and we'll just be talking a little bit about some of the emotional impact that COVID is having now in this very sort of strange duration that we are in currently, of a pandemic that is both seems to be relaxing somewhat and feeling safer, and then at the same time not. So we'll talk about the impacts of Omicron and just some of those different things. This will be a discussion of the psychology and emotions of people reacting to it, not so much of virology or anything. Neither of us are doctors, and so we won't be discussing that aspect as much as we will about how it's affecting people and how people are feeling. So thanks for listening. Please share. I wanted to mention that we've had a sharp increase in the number of downloads lately, and really appreciate people sharing about the show. Please go at BreakABrain on Twitter and let me know if there's things you'd like us to be discussing, or share the links or any of those kinds of things. Really appreciate all of you that are out there listening. Have a great week, Brainiacs. We're just saying, does a deep dive like this, for some people, maybe enhance a movie or TV experience? For some people, maybe ruin it. But we're here to, what's your pleasure? Dealer's choice. Anybody out there? We're here to ruin or improve your experience with pop culture. we're talking about Hawkeye today, the Marvel series, and one of the more popular ones I'm finding, and actually it's generating, at least from the groups that I'm in online, I see people talking about it. One of the great advantages of Hawkeye was that it was more fun, whereas I think some of I actually really enjoyed a lot.
They were all fun, but
but when people, I know that's one thing I heard about, like say WandaVision. It's like, oh, it looks kind of lighthearted and weird, and it's like weird and little fun moments, but it was pretty heavy, when you get to it.
There was a lot of darkness there.
And Hawkeye accomplished talking about some deep, dark things in a way that had a little bit more. Some people were comparing it to maybe like a Die Hard action movie versus like a more, it had some of those more light moments at the same time. It's pretty dark stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was
in there too, So.
Because we all associate, the Kingpin with lighter moments. But again, that shirt was rocking and lighthearted.
And the shirt, I've said that, I can't remember if we talked about this on mic or not, but I found out that Vincent D'Onofrio wanted to wear that Hawaiian shirt because it's what the Kingpin appears in the comic/graphic novel Spider-Man Family Business, which has a big Kingpin arc. That actually was some of the source material for this, even though it was a Spider-Man story, not a Hawkeye story.
Those little Easter eggs and cross-fertilizations that you get when they come up with these things. Yeah.
So I saw everybody that I have talked to was like, what the hell is up that shirt? But it's like, no, he was like, this is source material. I want a shirt that looks like that. And they did it. Yeah. So.
Well, and again, that's one of those things is like where the actors are right in on it. Like they're nerding with the rest of us, and they're.
And for me, imagine the power of being able to say, get me a shirt that looks just like that. And it happened. How did that happen? Did they make it? I don't know. I don't know that the artist who drew the comic was like, yep, this is a real thing.
Exactly. There's some poor person in in wardrobe going, what? Okay. And they're on the internet, sourcing fabric.
So I have a thought that pops in my head when I think of Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And we can go wherever, but the first thought that comes to my mind as a theme about the discussion is imposter syndrome. So, and manifested with a bunch of the characters. And I will even say, whether it's purposeful or not only is there like imposter syndrome of people doubting themselves and doubting their identity, you also have some of the characters are actually cosplayers who are choosing another identity for personal reasons, to do as well, which was a very interesting thing to throw in there. Which
that whole LARPing angle was just amazing, especially the fact too that it wasn't just random group of LARPers, it was all first responders.
Yeah.
So these are our real life heroes, right?
Yeah.
These are the folks that, do the things that most of us couldn't imagine doing, showing up in crisis. So to have it specifically be, now again, it obviously plays out in a particular way later on.
Right.
But it's still interesting because it does have, there's a commentary level there. These are the people that literally are our heroes in day-to-day life. And then they still feel the need to dress up, LARP, and do these things to feel heroic. And you're like, dude, you run into burning buildings.
And it's interesting because I saw a comment online about that where they said, LARPers exist in the MCU. That means theoretically there's probably some Marvel hero LARPers. Which, well, boy, just a Russian doll scenario. One of the things I actually felt, incidentally, while we're on that was really interesting was whenever that type of thing is showcased on television or movies, typically it's with derision. It's like, oh, look at these losers. And this was done very respectfully, which as they started showing it, I thought to myself, how are they going to handle this? Because there's a target audience here that, you're going to alienate if you're going to take the regular approach that maybe you watch an old episode of, Psych or really anything that's a procedural.
Anything, yeah.
It's like, oh, we have to associate with these people while we're doing our investigation. Mm-hmm. And right up front, there's this whole, I'll give you the suit back, but you got to fight me and lose. And at the end of that exchange, that was interesting where he's like, did you have fun? And Hawkeye's like, yeah, I'm glad I did it. And it's like, whoa, that was not what I thought it'd be like. Oh, what the, he comes in like, I want to respect whatever the hell you guys are doing. And then he's like, this is fun. It was good. And
it was probably neat to actually be engaged in some sort of a battle where like his life wasn't on the line. Right.
Right.
Oh, look, people do this for fun. Sorry. This is so much a work thing where I'm worried about dying.
Yeah, exactly. Like Thor's take on it. Hey, a friend from work. I see Hulk. We work together. And so that ties in with, let's say that right up front, if you don't mind. I mean, let's talk about Hawkeye and his, it comes out. They're very great at being self-referential, I think, these Marvel shows and movies. But they look at that and he is struggling a little bit with his identity as I'm a lame Avenger, which was people's take on Hawkeye a lot. You hear people make fun of it.
He doesn't have superpowers.
He has no powers, right, is the idea. As you, and for the audio here, air quotes around that, I think we'll get into that. Well, what would you say? I mean, obviously, superhuman archery ability. I mean, to the point of being like, whoa, are we sure he doesn't?
Yeah. Like, how did that bend around the corner? Yeah, exactly.
He's got an X Factor mutation in there somewhere,
Well, you see, I think that's the other part that I like about how the Marvel Universe has been constructed in terms of this thing is that not everybody that's on a team has, dealt with something related to gamma rays, super serums, all of the, whatever the thing is, the mutant gene, whatever these different things that come up. It's that you get some folks and they're on these teams and they're doing different things and for their own, like they have some sort of extraordinary ability. They bring something to the team and that they're this really interesting bridge because they are, again, not the supers, not the empowered, not the whatever the thing is, but they operate at the same level. And they're that bridge for, I guess you'd say, to now jump in with another universe for the muggles, for the non, it's that thing where you go, oh, wait a second. It's not always about having those powers, and that they see things from both sides. It's like, hey, I'm not all, I don't have this thing. I don't have the cybernetic, the arm added on. I haven't had my brain messed with. I haven't been, again, bitten, serum, gamma rayed, whatever, but they serve a purpose and they are full members. They just bring a different skill set. And I often refer to them when I do the work in the mental health stuff, as I refer to them as allies, that like, think about a Peggy Carter or a Nick Fury. Like, would you have S.H.I.E.L.D. without them? No. Yeah. And so they facilitate things, they fight alongside and at the same level. And then they also provide the whole, okay, is the person here that's not going to be able to jump off the building and do the thing? Or thinking even about Hawkeye and the fact that, like, that's the first time we've had to deal with the fact that dude wears hearing aids.
Fascinating choice, right? Say here's like a real world consequence health-wise, right? To this individual.
Which again doesn't happen if you're that superhuman that has the healing abilities or has whatever. Like, you're something usually about your superhumanness tends to protect you, whereas like Buddy is walking around with every flippin' scar, the hearing loss, all of these different things. And like you say, on some level, kind of questioning where he fits in. And you're like, no, you are a rock star just like the rest of them. And if anything, your ability to show up, what you do in terms of like how your family even takes this. And again, that whole putting along the backdrop of Christmas was brilliant for that, because you're seeing the implications. It was sort of right up there with Sam and the whole going for the bank loan, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and
here's that reality, that we don't tend to put front and center, in a big summer blockbuster, but there's the reality.
In the same way that they resolve like Sam's choice to say, I'm not going to take a super serum. It's available to me and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to train and be Captain America as me, right? And it's the same thing you're talking about with Hawkeye. He never faces that choice of gaining superpowers by choice, but I feel like one of the emotional arcs, and so with this imposter syndrome idea, it's like, who am I really? Am I really that guy? Am I really that person? And he gives a speech to Kate, Haley Stanfield's character, that is, to me, it was reminiscent of another Hawkeye speech in Age of Ultron when he talks to Wanda when they're ducking and covering, and he's like, look, I have a bow and arrow. I don't even know why am I even here, and you got to admire, right, by the way, anybody theoretically in the MCU who's like, yeah, I'm going to stand next to Thor and pull out a pistol and be, and let's go. I'm your backup, Thor. Yeah. And it's like, but yet to say, but that is what we see from maybe first responders often in the best of cases, or soldiers or things, people willing to put themselves out there, as well as people who are more metaphorically, people who are like, I'm going to put myself in a situation to help my loved one or to take a responsibility of my own mental health. Scary. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that, but I'm doing it anyway. Right. And
exactly. It's that, and you call a firefighter a hero. I'm like, oh, it's just what I do. It's my job description. Yeah. It's just what I do. And that Hawkeye's very much got that, well, this is just what I do. And then at the same time, that insecurity around the imposter syndrome. And I think that's even part of it in terms of that arc that he has with Kate. Part of it is the trying to talk her out of it is why would I drag this young woman into this? Because, again, battle scars, deafness, all these other kinds of things. You don't want to get into this. And that it was even this thing, like, you're not, again, that an imposter thing. It's not what you think it is. Yes, you saw this thing about me on the rooftop and the saving you and, how you saw that and you wanted to grow up to be me, but you're not seeing all these other things. And so it was that, don't put me on a pedestal, because the higher you put me up on a pedestal, the further I have to fall.
Exactly.
And so it was that interesting thing, but there was that arc where you did see, okay, you know what? Again, that balance, right? There's the good, there's the bad. Oh, we were able to do this and that thing. And does it come at a price? Yeah. But you know what? It's what's keeping, these people alive, or it's done this thing. And then again, even in terms of the villains, you still had characters that were, it's like, again, here's a hurt, traumatized person. And then when she finds out the backstory and that, hold on, these are not the people that she thinks they are. I was like, wait a minute, I'm being gaslit. So,
No, that's a good, I hadn't thought of that aspect of it. That's a good point.
So there's this whole other thing where, again, you have different iterations of hurt people and different iterations of where they're at in their growth. So, and so that he's able to get to that point where it's like, yeah, it's Christmas, what we thought it was going to be. No, but I'm bringing this young woman and her dog over, and we're going to do this, and we're going to whatever. And she's more part of our family than, I could have ever imagined. And yeah, she's, in a sense, look where her own family is. Yeah, she does have a lot more going on. Her background was more dysfunctional. I'm not claiming we're a Norman Rockwell painting over here, but she's still going to be safer in this line of work as part of my family than with the raging ball of toxicity that was over there. And the mom, I'm like, really, Kingpin? That's the way you thought you were going to get us? I'm like, gas on the fire, Mom. Way to go.
I had to create safety and stability for us, so I hooked up with Kingpin.
And so I just doubled down on the unhealthy, dysfunctional, toxic behavior,
And one of the things I think is very interesting to me is the way that it shows this juxtaposition and a real legitimate, not just a self-doubt. Like we excuse imposter syndrome by saying like, oh, it's all just self-doubt and anxiety. Well, here's an actual thing. He had a real sort of like rage-killing problem for a while with this when he went off the deep end as Ronan. And so now to circle back with that and say, and we saw this journey in like Endgame, where it's like, okay, now I'm good guy again. Am I really? How do I be a good guy again? And we see the real world consequences where one of the most interesting things about the series is he is the origin story for hero and villain / anti-hero. We'll see when her own show comes out. Because you've got Kate Bishop and you've got Echo, both of whom their careers, their super careers, whatever, have been born out of actions that he directly took.
Yeah.
Right. And so to say that and say, I have to live with that. So my imposter syndrome includes me screwing up and making huge errors and doing wrong things on purpose. And now what do I do with that? Right. I think it's really
and the fact that they confronted it and that was such a thread throughout it was really important. Like to me, that was from a character development thing. Again, just like bringing that out, addressing it, and making it central to his growth and his own healing. And I'm sure there were a lot of folks, and then it was really funny watching again the different threads with like the people who like to collect props. And it's like, you don't think there weren't 5 versions? They're not burning the only one in the barbecue for that scene, but the idea that he had to go through that and that Kate was part of it. And then, like you say, and then it sets it up for these 2 other potential spin-offs and leaves these 2 things. And again, there's the whole, what really happened to Kingpin? Do we know?
Sure. I will say this for the future, it's like, is he dead? Whatever. As far as that practical plot point goes, he was shot in the face in the comics once, and he went blind for a period of time because he's a sort of, there's something enhanced about Kingpin. He's super something, strong or just whatever. Super aggressive, who knows? Super
well, again, and again,
who knows?
Talk about a raging ball. Again, another person with and I think Daredevil did a great job of it, where you're just like, oh, okay, this is how people go evil. Again, raging ball of unhealed trauma, start off doing a thing that is meant to, balance the scales, seek vengeance, do whatever. And then somewhere on that, supposedly well-intentioned path, slippery slope.
Well,
and they just go down it like they're on a luge or something.
When you incorporate, and this is a weird take to say, Kingpin imposter syndrome? No, but to say, here's somebody who didn't resolve his own little rage spree. And when you look at the backstory that we're shown in Daredevil, where this MCU Kingpin, which who knows, I don't know how much they've changed or kept. We don't know yet. But if he is that guy, he killed his abusive father, right? And let's compare that maybe with the whole Ronin episode, or with many times where we've seen superheroes. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man makes some implication that he went dark for a while in his own universe. Anyway, to say, yeah, that was during my super big whoopsies, as I like to call them, superhero time, where it's like, yeah, I killed some people, or I made this happen, or whatever.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah. I didn't think it through to figure out what the possible consequences were.
And even Captain America, if you go back and read the original Winter Soldier comic series, it starts out with him not pulling punches as much and throwing people off trains. And it's like, they're bad guys, they're terrorists, and he is a soldier, and he does not have the Batman rule of no killing. But it's like, did you have to, throw all those guys off the train? And it's like, it's like, well,
exactly.
You can, so you do, or whatever. And so, anyway, interesting to see. Here's somebody who, even with a context to his actions, is not redeemed, right? It's like, no, the context is, he had this terrible backstory, but you know what? We see a lot of them that look at Echo, who's like obviously been a criminal and now is like not a hero at this point, but is saying, and so we get into, and maybe she's a good one to hit up with the imposter idea of like, well, I'm this crime boss, sort of local crime boss, but am I really? Who am I really? This living in both worlds, not just deafness, but yeah.
Exactly. And again, in terms of her identity, it was all centered on a certain number of like beliefs. And then to find out that those things that she believed in, those particular, events didn't actually happen the way she thought they did. And that she had actually, again, misdirected anger as part of the whole thing, and how she framed herself, how she framed who the bad guy was, all of these other things. And that was interesting too, in terms of also, not just her character having that kind of, oops moment, hold on, maybe this is not the person, when you think of Yelena's character as well, like that she has that whole other thing. And there's that whole confrontation with, I'm out to kill this guy because he's responsible for my sister's death. And it's like, no. Like, if there is anybody on the planet that is feeling Natasha's loss the same way, and I'm not even going to say more, but like, anybody that's feeling it like you, this is your guy. Mm-hmm. Like, if there is one person that you are going to find empathy, support, all of those other things, this is the other side of your coin. This is your buddy. This is your soulmate.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's the whole, and once again, the questioning too, Yelena is caught between this. Is she an assassin for hire, Black Widow style, or is she someone who's going to be the new Black Widow in the sense of like heroism? Mm-hmm. And, and once again, one of the, getting into maybe Kate Bishop a little bit, I loved let's look at the counter to her imposterism is at the end. This is really well done, where at the end she's like, hey, here's my superhero name. How about this? How about that? How about this? It's just a recurring joke of her character is bad at names, right? Yeah. And then he says, before the big banner of the series goes up, he's like, I got an idea. And Hawkeye pops up, right? Yeah. And it's like, you're the new Hawkeye. I mean, essentially, it's like, here's a passing of a torch, passing of a bow. Yeah. And to say, even at that moment, there's a juxtaposition there too of saying, yeah, I'm a superhero now. I'm a whatever I am, Yeah,
but it takes the passing of the torch for him to admit to it, for him to actually accept that he is a superhero. It's like, yeah, okay, hold on, I am that guy, and now I'm going to pass the torch. Like, that was like beautiful.
Absolutely right, and for her as well to say she's accepting the identity, but she isn't. And I read a little much into this, but she isn't saying, hey, you're retiring ish, and I'm the new you. There's not that level of like a surety. But he says to her, hey, you should be Hawkeye. You're Hawkeye here. Come on. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
What's your whole deal? No powers and no bow and arrow. You're Hawkeye. It makes sense, right? But to say, but there's a self-doubt.
Now, and any piece of advice I'll give you, ear protection. Wear better ear protection, and see if the LARPing people can get you. I'll hook you up with Tony's people so that you can get some better body protection than I had in my early years, kind of thing. Like, but you're going to take stuff on the arms, possibly as a given.
Now, you mentioned gaslighting. And the element that plays in her imposter syndrome, where she's like, oh, I'm not, am I who I should be? Should I be as confident as I am? Sometimes more cocky, and then sometimes more self-doubt. But a lot of that is given to her, of people telling her, even Hawkeye at some point telling her, no, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah. No, well, you see, and I mean, there were so many things that I loved about Echo's character and how they, again, did the bad guys was, I mean, first of all, there's this idea that, I mean, when you see how, I mean, it existed in the comics before, and then, happened in the MCU. And I would say that, Marvel is still doing it better. Are they perfect? No, but there's still issues around, diversity, gender balance, representation, and inclusion from a variety of different communities. So to have, these, we're now starting to see all of these different things. So to have her in there as this character where you're going, okay, this is not just about a particular character. You're like, here is an actress who is coming in. And here is a person that lives with, a prosthetic and speaks in sign language and does all of these things. This is not somebody, playing a character. It's in those regards, there's no, green screen things to put on the prosthetic. It's like they've brought in this actress who, again, my understanding is that this is actually her first performance. And so she represents all of these different kinds of diversity. And then she also, again, just like, again, we've talked about superheroes and reframing, and there's always like, what's the downside of something, and then taking that and reframing it. So like her, in a sense, her ability to not hear allows her to lip read and do all of these other kinds of things that she can use as an asset to focus to this. And so, but again, she's one of those ones that, because of her own backstory and where she was put and her trauma, and then being gaslit by people that saw, wait a second, if I can harness her rage and her vengeance and this and that, and if she thinks she's on a righteous battle, I can literally unleash her like a weapon. And I think that's the other part, is that she realizes that instead of being this, having seen herself as, I'm this powerful person that can do these things despite these, what other people see as shortcomings. So in some respects, she had all the reframing, but again, kind of like paralleling Carol Danvers in the early part where she's been gaslit to believe that she's Kree. It's the, oh, wait a second, you have this aha moment where you're like, yeah, you know what? I am actually phenomenal, kick-ass, all of these things, but a bunch of dingbats with a, not cool agenda have been using me as a weapon. And you have a little bit of like, an identity crisis, and doing the whole, wait a minute, like, who are the real bad guys here and what side of the equation? Yes, I was painted as a bad guy because this, and this, but, especially for her, I mean, with Carol, there was the whole, it was the noble race of the Kree, and you're like, okay, well, you guys live in your own little self-affirming bubble, where the Kool-Aid flows. Whereas, she was in whereas Echo in this world, like, yeah, we are the outlaws, but we are the outlaws because of this, and this, and society just doesn't understand us. But we kind of embrace our outlaw status, where she's like kind of realizing, oh, wait a minute, I've been surrounded by a bunch of jerks who are using me, and actually using me contrary to my own, they're using my pain to help me inflict pain on other people. That doesn't even resolve my vengeance issue. And so I'm not even checking off the box I thought I was.
Absolutely. That's a great... Yeah, I hadn't thought about that aspect of it, but as you're saying that, it ties in too with the, and I'm the comics nerd sometimes here, but Echo, I believe in the source material, which I had not really read anything with Echo in it. She's often a Daredevil enemy. And then also, but at one point becomes an Avenger. This is once again not to, I can't spoil anything because I don't know anything, but what are they going to do with her? She's too interesting to be a straight up bad guy, probably. But anyway, she also has this ability, like you said, lip read, hyper observational. But she has the ability to learn and imitate when she's fighting people. She can do what they do almost right out the gate. And so, whether or not they're going to use that too. But as you're talking about it, that hit me like, oh, there's this like sponge aspect to her. It's like her superpower as we often say, and
echo.
her weakness.
She repeats back.
Right?
Yeah. That's the echo quality. She echoes back their fighting style and beats them at their own game.
And yet, and that's the weakness as well as the superpower, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So no, like I said, I think it's another wonderful example of being able to take these things. And I think that's the other part too. Like we talked about, like you're referencing back to the comics, that what I'm loving about the MCU is that they're not just sitting there and pulling up, here's the blah, 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 blah series, and we're recreating it frame for frame. It's the, and again, I know that it makes some folks twitchy when you start hybridizing these things, but I think what it's often allowed for, and I think this is a great example of it, for more character development and for doing these kinds of things that really do give you, both well fleshed out story arcs as well as opening up doors. And you never know what's the next door with a new character that's going to be open. You can address something like, again, Elena and Hawkeye, like that whole dynamic. Again, even the idea of bringing in Kate Bishop as, here's this kid that saw a thing. And, we don't often talk about there's the New York thing and there's certain references made to it. But he's like, okay, here's pulling that one kid out and her perspective and what it did. And here's this whole, thing seen through her eyes. And then, of course, it, again, ties into all of these other things and there's interconnected. But it was like that whole other, like, really cool focus, I thought, and bringing in, again, women. Women from a variety of ethnicities, as well as now we've got, varying abilities. So like, to me, it's part of the marker of how Marvel's getting better at inclusivity. And that in some respects, that also is much more about reality. And that's where, again, when you think about Sam and those closing scenes of Falcon and Winter Soldier with the, really? A black man is Captain America? I'm like, boom, there's your earful. There is your, your lesson right there. Dude's not wrong. You would listen, to Cap when he was Steve without batting an eye. And now you're gonna challenge, Sam. There you go. There's your butt on a silver platter. He's not backing down.
Exactly. And speaking of, once again, in that context, speaking of it feeling like, am I an imposter or who am I in this realm? Becoming Captain America, I love that they also dove into the concept of I can, but do I want to, as a black man in America, right? There was that feeling of like, do I want to take this on? And even talking to the past super soldier who was the first black, Captain America-ish, kind of identity, to be like, he's like, no, don't do that. Don't put that on yourself. You're not going to be welcome. And for him to ultimately decide. And so anyway, to that they included that commentary that doesn't judge either direction, but to say, what do I take this? And that's the other
part too. And it goes to some other conversations we've had around superpowers, where folks seem to think that superpowers and superheroes are all of these. It's just all the good stuff. And the best stories always have, okay, well, what's the cost of that? Yes. What's the cost in terms of whether it's the managing whatever the power is? What's the cost to having a real life, a family, all of these other kinds of things? What's the cost? And that's what I'm really loving about, again, what they're exploring here is going a little deeper on those things, that it's not just about your ability to blow this up, zap that, web sling here, all the sexy bits. It's getting into the, you know what? There's a downside there.
And that it's interesting. The most healthy family / relationship in the MCU is probably Hawkeye's. Right. And as it is a grounding element that he offers to the supers, who are a step removed from humanity, if you will. It reminds me, in a way, cross fandom, of like Doctor Who. One of the recurring themes of that show is that he always has they, I should say, now that we've been more inclusive with Doctor Who this last season. there's always a traveling companion or companions who,
Yeah.
one of the purposes of their presence is to say the doctor's not human and also can swing towards either great kindness or, great vengeance, on people who threaten the earth.
It's that ally mechanism. It's that idea of, heroes function best on teams, obviously with other superheroes, but also with allies. And that they give them that perspective that can be supportive and that in a sense kind of walk in two worlds because they know what it's like to be on their team. And that idea of think of how many times when you think of all the different, characters in the MCU, other than things like, obviously seeing where Tony Stark lives and Stark Tower and those kinds of things, how many of their homes have we seen over the course of things? Now, again, when we've got into the TV series, yes, you do see more, but I mean, we've been to we've been to his place before. This is not the first time. We've had scenes, where it's, even the blip and everything like that. Like that's that whole thing. I mean, heck, Nick Fury and his toast thing.
Right. There's a grounding there to say.
The whole, like the Lego on the all camped out in his house, like just the fact that the door is open and suddenly, the big ass farmhouse has got Avengers, tying up the bathroom and using all the hot water.
Yeah. And that concept of saying they're going to have to double bunk. Oh, what? No, these guys are going to want to be treated as normals. And so you look at that presence, that's another, you could say ability, right? Superpower that's hidden in a non-superpowered person. I was talking to someone just the other day about this concept having to do with their kid fitting into school, right? And looking at a very neurodivergent and saying I'm doing this thing and I'm getting feedback later, that hey, you shouldn't have done that. What? But it, and the concept that emerged from this discussion was to say, not to say to be careful to avoid this idea that you're wrong because you didn't anticipate what a neurotypical would think, but to try to internalize the concept that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who don't think the way I do, and that's okay. I have abilities and weaknesses because of my way that my brain works. But to say, I got to learn that, others aren't always going to get it, or they're not going to see it the same way I do, and I need to accommodate that, and I need to just be careful about that.
And that's the other, and I think that's really important, and that's what he brings to the table, that larger conversation, and that's, part of what I do with the work that I do is advocating for this idea that, when we talk about neurodiversity is actually everybody. It's just that, true neurodiversity. We are all, it's just that there are these things that have been determined, as the normal, as the center have been the box that, then becomes, neurotypical or again, mentally healthy. And what's really interesting is that actually think of this thing that, again, there's parts that go out and that some of us live with more little things, out on the edges there. But when you've created this little circle and that's the definition normal, and then everything else is, divergent or mentally healthy, and then, a disorder. It's like, no. These are all within the realm of human experience. And that when you put that line around some arbitrary spot that goes, this is, from you basically, you punish everybody. We all lose out because it says, oh, well, now there's a particular way of communicating. No, there isn't. Like so often, and I think probably one of the best examples is the experience that so many folks who are autistic have. And that they can't communicate, this, and there's all these things about communication and social skills, and then where it's defined based on their deficiency as determined by some sort of normal. And it's like, no. It's just a different language. It's a different way of seeing the world. I mean, one of my, if you're going to talk about a superhero trait, for example, associated with that neurodivergence, it's the ultimate BS detector. They will just talk right. I mean, and again, and that's a Drax thing. That's a Reed Richards thing. That's a whole, what are all of these weird artificial layers of social dancing that you are putting over top of whatever, when it's just, da-da-da-da. It's like the ultimate BS filter.
I've seen that happen where I knew someone once who was invited and pressured a little bit, maybe, to go to a big sales pitch thing, and talking to this person afterwards, they had a lot of social functioning issues that were on the autistic spectrum. And it was like, oh, here I am at this big training. And it was one of those kind of companies that's almost cultish, that's kind of like, and kind of known for that.
Oh, my God. So, that's hard enough as it is. They must have just been freaking out.
Well, actually, no, the really interesting thing, and this isn't probably true for everybody, is even though it was overstimulating, there's this feeling of like, meh. And it's like, oh, this looks like a dumb thing, I'm not going to do it. And like a lot of the techniques that might brainwash-ish a neurotypical person, they were immune. It's just a bulletproof.
Your Kool-Aid. Exactly. They were bulletproof. Exactly. Like everybody else is just lapping up the Kool-Aid, and they're just like, I don't get it.
One of the first times, and I do this a lot, if I've done, when I've done counseling with people who are on the autistic spectrum, a lot of times the reason they seek it out, the counseling, is to talk about some of the difficulties of being surrounded by neurotypicals and that treatment, but also to talk about being social and working on some, what we might call social skills, but what we really mean is neurotypical social behaviors, right?
Yeah.
And one thing, I've really adjusted my approach over time to try to embrace the strengths. And one of the reasons is I hit upon this idea where it's like, here's an example of the way people communicate in a neurotypical way. They say, do you want to go to the movies? I want to go see blah, blah, blah. And if you might be very, very grounded in a very like concrete kind of thinking, black or white thinking, you might say, oh, I don't want to see that. It's not my type of movie. No thanks. And you forget, or you don't pick up on rather, that there's a buried question in there, which is, do you want to spend time with me? But I'm not going to say that.
Exactly.
Right?
And then I'm using this movie as a vehicle. Yeah.
Yes. And the first time that I described that to someone, I was like, so there's kind of a hidden question. So they'll say, do you want to see this movie? And they really mean, do you want to hang out with me? And then there's this pause. And I said, like, like a lie. I mean, if you think about it, it's like a bad way to communicate, actually, in a way. And it's like, so there's a strength there to say, yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would say, do you want to hang out? Maybe. And not that nobody does, but to hide it and wrap it up in this passive aggressive way that we often do without thinking about it if we're non-autistic, then, it's just interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think of how many communication things are grounded in those kinds of things. In terms of, and I think of, and again, I'd like, from what I'm seeing with, my kids and some other things in terms of the next generations, I am seeing some changes, but I even think of things like dating relationships and even right back to childhood where it was the whole, little Tommy's hitting me. Well, that's because Tommy likes you, because that's, and again, it's like, sorry, hitting somebody is not so we might deal with it. We started dealing with it from a bullying and whatever, but it's that idea of you need to communicate clearly. Yes, is it going to be awkward for Tommy to say the thing or to whatever? But instead of normalizing for a girl to, accept being hit and taking being hit as, a positive interaction, because that's not going to cause any problems in the future. How about we address the core idea that for as awkward as it might be, Tommy, if you like Susie, don't open with a hit. Don't open with pulling her pigtails, poking her or whatever. That's just not cool. But that's exactly that kind of thing where it's those weird layers where it's I can't do the thing, so I've got to do this other thing. And you get those weird little layers of either behavior, communication. And then what happens is, I mean, in most of the cases, other people refer to awkward and not reading social cues is effectively somebody going, the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. Right.
And we all know how awkward that was in the fairy tale, right?
Yeah, and that kid.
We're all walking around with a naked king, and somehow we're gonna just whatever, and then oops, the kid says it, and then we all go, oh, and that is, I think, honestly, so much of the issue that neurotypicals have with that is whether they are conscious of it or not. It's most of the time those communication things are literally. Somebody said the emperor has no clothes, and the rest of us who have been pretending that he has are now caught out.
Yeah, we're all indicated then. We're all indicted. Yeah. So, a very interesting thing. And I guess to put that out there, I'd say, probably if people want to view it for that reason or in that framework to say, yeah, maybe how does this interact with me and the way I feel about myself and my own callings and things in life? So, well.
And it does come back to what we're talking about here, because there's a whole imposter syndrome. And those of us that live with neurodivergence and mental health diagnoses often feel that we have to mask, and the emotional labor and the psychological weight and energy it takes to mask and, function within society. There's, in some respects, there's Hawkeye and the whole, how do I pass in this world when this is what I've done? How do I do whatever when I've also been Ronan? How do I, part of the imposter syndrome is the fact that you don't feel firmly grounded in one world or the other, because you don't feel you can be accepted for who you genuinely are.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm loving about these conversations is it's bringing people to places of self-acceptance. And whether it's him, whether it's Kate, whether it's Echo, or Yelena, there's all of these layers and all of these different characters going through different things that are about, will people accept me for who I really am? And the notion of masking, it's just the thing is with superheroes, you literally physically get masks sometimes.
Except in the case of Hawkeye, that's stupid when he sees.
Yeah, exactly.
And let's be honest, the comics Hawkeye and the old cartoon show Hawkeye's mask is pretty stupid. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the reasons people don't like Hawkeye.
And that's one of the things that I have to say that I kind of liked, how even back in that very first X-Men movie where they just addressed the whole, costume thing.
We're not doing
how they're doing it. They're like, it's like, well, would it be better if you were in like yellow tights or something?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, good. We're addressing that up front. We're going to do costumes differently now. They might not be what you're expecting and, directly from, on the page canon kind of thing. But that's because, either that doesn't translate well. And that was even the whole thing with Loki and Richard E. Grant's character, where they just put him in the old
pajama outfit.
Part of me loved the fact that it was him, and that takes as an actor to be able to walk out there in those leotards and bodysuits circa 1972.
We need what was his name in that, just deep cut, Mayflower from Hudson Hawk. We need that kind of energy, that wacky, kooky villain energy for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Tell everybody your website.
Okay. Speak Up is the name of my company, and I have a Embrace Your Superpowers program, which is what we talk about, and that's at www.speak-up.co. And there you can find things about the Embrace Your Superpowers mental health and neurodivergence program and the Bulletproof to Stigma one, which again, one relies on Marvel and one draws from the BTS universe to give people fun and engaging ways of learning about their own mental health and neurodivergence, reframing to find assets where, your those around you or your inner critic might find liabilities, and to go forward in a fun and empowered way.
Well, and I always like to plug it and share that. And people, if you listen to our episode that came out a little while ago about a little bit more of the nuts and bolts mental health stuff with how to identify your superpowers, and you were kind of to share some of your program in that, and you always are kind to come on here. And I like to remind people that, Sharon comes and does this, is nice enough to come and talk with me about Marvel and stuff. At the same time, you've got such a background with mental health and advocacy. You were the health minister, for crying out loud, of Manitoba. I mentioned that to someone the other day. I was like, I have a friend who comes on the podcast. She used to be the health minister of Manitoba. And they were like, of what? Like, of Manitoba. Yeah. That's a whole province in Canada. And, and you've really crafted this great intervention that has changed a little bit and added to the way I work with people. So I really
and I appreciate that. Put it this way, we talked about this before, I developed this, a while back. And so and this was the language that my family used. And, when you're health minister and you're responsible for a $6 billion budget and the healthcare of 1.3 people, your staff ends up developing the little list of words that the minister is not allowed to say. And don't mention superpowers. Don't talk about neuroscience. Like, we know that you're a nerd and we love that. But, when the media shows up, when you're in question period, small list of words here that, are a little too nerdy. So no. But it is one of those things, because you stop and think about it and you're like, yeah, that just sounds weird. But again, kind of like Hawkeye, but this is just what I do,
Oh, and they're like, I can see that. They're like, Wolverine, we can get away with. Adam Warlock, come on. Well, thank you again, as always.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtamparts.com.